अस्सलाम वालेकुम स्टूडेंट्स, वेलकम टू माय चैनल। आज हम पाक 522 के मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट लेक्चर वाइज एमसीक्यूज स्टार्ट करने लगे हैं। इधर हम लेक्चर नंबर 13 से 28 तक कंप्लीट करेंगे और इस वीडियो के साथ ही फाइनल टर्म प्रिपरेशन के हवाले से तमाम एमसीक्यूज आप तक पहुंच जाएंगे। तो चलिए स्टार्ट करते हैं। हु प्रेजेंटेड द ऑब्जेक्टिव्स रेजोल्यूशन इन द कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली? लियाकत अली खान. On which date was the objectives resolution passed? 12 March 1949. Before Pakistan adopted its own constitution, which law served as the interim constitutional framework? Government of India Act 1935. According to the Objectives Resolution, sovereignty over the entire universe belongs to Allah Almighty. How was the state authority to be exercised under the Objectives Resolution? Through chosen representatives of the people. Which constitutional arrangement was promised by the Objectives Resolution? A federation with autonomous units. What did the resolution declare about the judiciary? Its independence would be fully secured. Which freedom was specifically assured to minorities? Freedom to profess and practice their religions. The resolution aimed to enable Muslims to order their life according to the Quran and Sunnah. The Objectives Resolution is best described as Pakistan's first constitutional guiding document. In 1985, the Objective Resolution became a substantive part of the 1973 Constitution as Article 2A. Which group offered the strongest opposition to the resolution in the Constituent Assembly? Pakistan National Congress members. Who was a prominent religious supporter of the Objectives Resolution? Maulana Shabbir Ahmad Usmani. The resolution attempted to reconcile Islamic principles with modern representative democracy. Which later constitution provided the most comprehensive expression of the resolution's principle? 1973 Constitution. The Government of India Act 1935 was adopted by Pakistan primarily as interim constitution. Pakistan's first Constituent Assembly was established under the Indian Independence Act 1947. The first Basic Principles Committee report was presented on 28 September 1950. Who presented the first BPC report? Liaquat Ali Khan. Which language did the first BPC report recommend as the only state language? Urdu. The second BPC report was presented by Khwaja Nazimuddin. Under the second BPC report, the House of Units was proposed to have 120 seats. Which proposed body was to examine laws in the light of the Quran and Sunnah? Board of Ulama. The Bogra formula was presented in 1953. The parity formula sought to provide equal representation to East and West Pakistan. The Bengali language movement reached a critical stage in 1952. Who dissolved the first Constituent Assembly in October 1954? Governor General Ghulam Muhammad. Who challenged the dissolution of the first Constituent Assembly? Maulvi Tamizuddin Khan. Which court ultimately validated the dissolution of the first Constituent Assembly? Federal Court. The Second Constituent Assembly successfully framed the Constitution of 1956 under the leadership of Chaudhry Muhammad Ali. The Constitution of 1956 came into force on 23rd March 1956. Which title was officially adopted by Pakistan under the 1956 Constitution? Islamic Republic of Pakistan. The 1956 Constitution established which form of government? Parliamentary. The legislature created under the 1956 Constitution was unicameral. How many members were proposed in the 1956 National Assembly? 300. Which languages were recognized as national languages by the 1956 Constitution? Urdu and Bengali. The minimum voting age under the 1956 Constitution was 21 years. The immediate end of the 1956 Constitution resulted from the October 1958 martial law. The Constitution of 1962 introduced a presidential system. Approximately how many basic Democrats formed the Electoral College under Ayub Khan's system? 80,000. The National Assembly under the 1962 Constitution consisted of 156 members. Elections under the 1962 Constitution were mainly indirect. The 1973 Constitution was passed by the National Assembly on 12 April 1973. Which legislature was introduced by the 1973 Constitution? A bicameral parliament. Why has the 1973 Constitution proved more durable than the earlier Constitution? Because it was based on broad political consensus, which set contains all four essential elements of a state: population, territory, government, and sovereignty. Which element refers to the supreme and final authority of a state? Sovereignty. The government is best understood as an agency through which the state acts. Which statement correctly distinguishes a state from government? The state is permanent, government may change. The primary function of legislature is to make laws. The executive is mainly responsible for implementing laws and policies. The judiciary primarily interprets laws and administers justice. The theory of separation of powers is most strictly associated with the presidential system. Which country is used as a common example of strict separation of powers? United States. Fusion or concentration of executive and legislative powers is a feature of parliamentary government. In Pakistan's parliamentary system, the real executive is the Prime Minister. What is the main purpose of checks and balance? The main purpose of checks and balance is to prevent abuse and concentration of power. Which state element identifies the fixed geographical area under state authority? Territory. Which organ can review whether state action is constitutional? Judiciary. Why must the three organs of government coordinate with one another? Because state functions are interdependent. The word legislature is derived from the Latin word lex and latus, referring to law, and carrying or proposing. Under Article 50, Pakistan's parliament consists of President, National Assembly, and Senate. The National Assembly represents citizens mainly on the basis of population. The Senate primarily protects the principle of equal representation of provinces. A candidate for president of Pakistan must be at least 45 years old. The president is elected by an electoral college comprising parliament and provincial assemblies. The constitutional term of the president is 5 years. A president may not hold office for more than how many consecutive terms? 2. Impeachment of the president required two-thirds of the total membership of both houses. When the office of president is vacant, who acts as a president? Chairman of Senate. The Prime Minister is elected by the National Assembly under Article 91. The minimum age for election to the National Assembly is 25 years. The minimum age for election to the Senate is 30 years. The The quorum required in either house is generally 1/4 of total membership. Which house has exclusive authority to pass the federal budget and money bills? National Assembly. The executive branch is mainly responsible for administering and implementing laws. In Pakistan, the nominal executive at the federal level is the president. The real executive authority in Pakistan is exercised by the Prime Minister and Cabinet. Civil servants who continue despite changes of government are called the permanent executives. Article 41-100 of the Constitution primarily deal with the federal executive. The President's Secretariat is located at Awan-e-Sadr. Provincial governors are appointed by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister. The federal cabinet is collectively responsible to the National Assembly. Federal administer Federal ministers are formally appointed by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister, who is the chief executive of a province, chief minister. The chief minister is elected by the provincial assembly. At the provincial level, the nominal executive is the governor, who is the senior most civil servant and administrative head of a province, chief secretary, who is the senior most civil servant at the federal level, cabinet secretary. A major function of bureaucracy is to provide administrative continuity and implement policy. The judiciary is primarily responsible for interpreting law and administering justice. The Supreme Court of Pakistan is established under Article 176. The permanent seat of the Supreme Court is in Islamabad. The Supreme Court's appellate jurisdiction is mainly provided under Article 185. Disputes between the Federation and provinces traditionally fall under the court's original jurisdiction. The power to advise the President on a legal question is called advisory jurisdiction. The Supreme Court's power to do complete justice is stated in Article 187. Judgments of the Supreme Court are binding on other courts under Article 189 and 190. The Federal Shariat Court was established in 1980. The Federal Shariat Court is constitutionally linked with Article 203C. How many judges, including the Chief Justice, comprise the Federal Shariat Court according to the handouts? 8. How many FSC judges must be Islamic scholars? 3. Appeals from the Federal Shariat Court go to the Shariat Appellate Bench of the Supreme Court. High courts may issue constitutional writs mainly under Article 199. According to the handouts, the Federal Constitutional Court was created through the 27th Amendment. Federalism divides constitutional authority between central and regional governments. A defining feature of a federal system is a written constitution with divided powers. In an unitary system, ultimate constitutional power is mainly held by the central government. Pakistan adopted federalism mainly because of its regional, linguistic, and geographical diversity. Which article declares Pakistan a federal republic? Article 1. The Senate supports federalism by providing equal provincial representation. The detailed subjects of federal legislation are contained in the Federal Legislative List. The Federal Legislative List is located in the 4th schedule. After the 18th Amendment, residuary legislative powers mainly belong to the provinces. Which list was abolished by the 18th Amendment? concurrent legislative list was abolished by the 18th Amendment. The Council of Common Interest is established under Article 153. The National Finance Commission is provided under Article 160. The one unit scheme was introduced in 1955. The one unit scheme was abolished in 1970. The separation of East Pakistan in 1971 highlighted the need for provincial autonomy and equitable power sharing. Fundamental rights are contained mainly in Article 8-28. Article 8 declares that a law inconsistent with fundamental right is void to the extent of inconsistency. Protection of life and liberty is guaranteed by Article 9. An arrested person must ordinarily be produced before a magistrate within 24 hours. The right to a fair trial and due process is protected by Article 10A. The inviolability of human dignity and privacy of home is covered by Article 14. Freedom of movement is guaranteed under Article 15. Freedom of assembly is protected by Article 16. Freedom of association and the right to form political parties are provided by Article 17. Freedom of trade, business, or profession is guaranteed under Article 18. The right to information is protected by Article 19A. Freedom to profess, practice, and propagate religion is protected by Article 20. Free and compulsory education for children aged 5 to 16 is guaranteed by Article 25A. High courts enforce fundamental rights through writ jurisdiction under Article 199. During an emergency, certain rights may be temporarily restricted under Articles 232-234. Civil rights mainly protect individuals against undue interference and abuse of power. Political rights primarily enable citizens to participate in governance and public affairs, which is primarily a civil right, right to life and liberty, which is primarily a political right, freedom of association. A safeguard against arbitrary arrest and detention are mainly found in Article 10. The constitutional right to fair trial is found in Article 10A. Equality before law and equal protection of law are guaranteed by Article 25. Freedom of speech and expression is protected under Article 19. The right to form political parties is mainly protected under Article 17. The right to vote in Pakistan is exercised subject to election laws and voter registration. A peaceful public meeting is most directly linked with freedom of assembly, which case expanded the interpretation of the right to life to include environmental protection, Shahla versus Wapta, which case is associated with protection of political association and party activity, Benazir Bhutto versus Federation. Civil and political rights strengthen democracy mainly by promoting accountability and public participation. Constitutional restriction on speech or assembly must generally be reasonable and imposed by law. Rights and duties are best described as complementary aspects of citizenship. The constitutional duty of loyalty to the state is stated in Article 5. Obedience to the Constitution and law is the obligation of every citizen and every person within Pakistan. Which action is a basic democratic responsibility? Voting responsibly. Paying taxes contributes directly to public services and national development. Respecting the rights of others helps maintain social order and mutual dignity. Protecting public property is important because it belongs to society and supports public welfare. Responsible political participation includes peaceful debate and lawful engagement. Citizens strengthen accountability by questioning public officials through lawful means. Community welfare activities contribute to national building and social cohesion. Digital citizenship requires citizens to use online platforms responsibly. Environmental responsibility includes protecting natural resources. A citizen's duty to obey law does not require obedience to clearly unlawful private commands. Public participation improves governance by increasing transparency and responsiveness. The balance between rights and responsibilities is essential for a stable democratic society. The principles of a policy are contained in Articles 29-40. The principles of policy are generally directive and non-justiciable. Their main purpose is to guide the state towards welfare, justice, and good governance. Which article promotes the Islamic way of life? Article 31. Promotion of local government institutions is addressed in Article 32. Discouraging parochial, racial, tribal, sectarian, and provincial prejudices is required by Article 33. Full participation of women in national life is promoted by Article 34. Protection of marriage, family, mother, and child is covered by Article 35. Protection of the legitimate rights and interests of minorities is addressed in Article 36. Promotion of social justice and removal of social evils is linked with Article 37. The social and economic well being of the people is emphasized in Article 38. Participation of people from all parts of Pakistan in the armed forces is encouraged by Article 39. Strengthening bonds with the Muslim world is stated in Article 40. Why are the principles of policy described as resource dependent? Because their implementation often requires valuable financial and administrative capacity. Who bears the primary responsibility for applying the principles of policy? Organs and authorities of the state. Which issue directly affects the equal citizenship of religious communities, minority rights? Gender-based violence is primarily discussed under women's rights. Child labor is a violation most directly connected with child rights. Restrictions, threat, or censorship faced by journalists relate mainly to freedom of expression. Unauthorized collection or misuse of personal online data raises concerns about digital rights and privacy. Accessibility and equal participation are central to the rights of persons with disabilities. Climate change and pollution are increasingly treated as issues of environmental and climate justice. The National Commission for Human Rights is commonly abbreviated as NCHR. Which institution specifically focuses on women's status and equality? NCSW. The Human Rights Commission of Pakistan is known mainly for monitoring, advocacy, and public awareness. The Federal Ombudsman primarily addresses complaints concerning maladministration by federal agencies. The Supreme Court Judgment PLD 2014 SC 699 is associated with protection of minority rights. Workplace harassment protections are especially relevant to safe and dignified employment. Early and forced marriage is mainly categorized as a challenge involving women and child rights. Effective human rights protection requires constitutional guarantees together with institutions, courts, and enforcement. A constitutional amendment is a formal change to the constitution. The amendment procedure in Pakistan is mainly provided in Article 239. A constitutional amendment bill may originate in either House of Parliament. Passage of a constitutional amendment requires at least two-thirds of the total membership of each house. If an amendment alters the limits of a province, it also requires approval by the concerned provincial assembly. The required majority in the concerned provincial assembly is two-thirds of total membership. After Parliament passes a constitutional amendment, the President's role is mainly formal assent. Can the President constitutionally refuse assent to a duly passed amendment bill? No, he cannot. A rigid constitution is one that can be amended through a special procedure. A flexible constitution is generally amended more easily, often through ordinary legislative procedure. The basic structure doctrine suggests that some core constitutional features should not be destroyed, which is commonly viewed as a core constitutional feature: judicial independence. The central institution in Pakistan's amendment process is Parliament, which amendment is widely associated with strengthening provincial autonomy. 18th Amendment. The special amendment procedure protects constitutional stability by requiring broad political agreement. Constitutional engineering means using formal constitutional change to redesign and distribution of political power. The original 1973 constitution placed real executive power in the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. The Eighth Amendment was enacted in 1985, which provision gave the President discretionary power to dissolve the National Assembly, Article 58(2)(b). The Eighth Amendment mainly shifted executive power towards the President. Article 58(2)(b) allowed the President to dismiss an elected government and National Assembly. Between 1988 and 1996, Article 58(2)(b) was used to dismiss elected government 4 times. Which Prime Minister's government was dismissed by President Ghulam Ishaq Khan in 1993? Nawaz Sharif. The 13th Amendment was passed in 1997. The main effect of the 13th Amendment was to delete Article 58(2)(b). After the 13th Amendment, the President largely returned to a ceremonial role. The 17th Amendment was passed during the rule of General Pervez Musharraf. The 17th Amendment was enacted in 2003. What did the 17th Amendment do to Article 58(2)(b)? It restored it. The repeated addition and removal of Article 58(2)(b) mainly weakened democratic stability and parliamentary supremacy. The 18th Constitutional Amendment was enacted in 2010. Which agreement provided a major political foundation for the 18th Amendment? Charter of Democracy, 2006. The Parliamentary Committee on Constitutional Reforms was chaired by Raza Rabbani. The 18th Amendment permanently removed Article 58(2)(b). Its removal restored the President mainly to the role of constitutional and ceremonial head. Under the restored parliamentary system, the principal executive authority is the Prime Minister. Which legislative list was abolished by the 18th Amendment? Concurrent legislative list. Most subjects removed from the concurrent list were transferred to the provinces. The amendment strengthened which body for Federal Provincial Coordination? Council of Common Interest. The National Finance Commission is important for distribution of financial resources. Provincial ownership in natural resources was strengthened to promote equitable federalism. The 18th Amendment strengthened the Election Commission through a more consultative appointment process. Judicial appointments after the amendment involved the Judicial Commission and a parliamentary committee. The amendment enhanced democratic accountability by strengthening parliamentary oversight and committees. The overall constitutional impact of the 18th Amendment was to strengthen parliamentary democracy and provincial autonomy. इसके साथ ही हमारा पाक 522 के मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंट एमसीक्यूज फाइनल टर्म प्रिपरेशन के हवाले से यहाँ कंप्लीट हो जाते हैं। मुझे पूरी उम्मीद है कि ये वीडियो आपके लिए बहुत यूजफुल रहेगी। इसमें तमाम आर्टिकल्स का जिक्र है और काफी मिलते जुलते हैं, तो काफी अपने ध्यान से इनको याद रखना है, जहन में रखना है। और लेकिन ये है बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट आपके शॉर्ट क्वेश्चंस के हवाले से, लॉन्ग क्वेश्चंस के हवाले से और एमसीक्यूज के हवाले से। ठीक है, तो मुझे पूरी उम्मीद है कि वीडियो आपके लिए बहुत ज्यादा यूजफुल रहेगी। लेकिन अगर आपका कोई सवाल हो या आप कोई फीडबैक देना चाहें तो मुझे कमेंट सेक्शन में जरूर बताइएगा। चैनल पर नए हैं तो सब्सक्राइब करना हरगिज़ ना भूलिएगा। और मेरी इस वीडियो को लाजमी अपने फेलो स्टूडेंट के साथ वर्चुअल यूनिवर्सिटी के डिफरेंट प्लेटफॉर्म्स पे शेयर कीजिए, ताकि आपकी तरह बाकी स्टूडेंट्स भी इन लेक्चर से, इन वीडियो से फायदा हासिल कर सके। मैं इंशाल्लाह ताला अपने नेक्स्ट वीडियो के साथ जल्द हाजिर होंगी। तब तक आप सब अपना बहुत ख्याल रखिएगा। अल्लाह हाफिज।